Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
After losing my job at a big retail chain due to company-wide layoffs, I found myself desperately searching for anything to keep paying my bills. The country store wasn't exactly my dream job, but the elderly couple who owned it were the sweetest people you could meet, and the regular customers were mostly friendly locals who'd been shopping there for decades. 3 months into the job, I was getting pretty comfortable with the routine. It was a quiet Wednesday afternoon, and I was running low on cash in my register. I had just finished helping an elderly lady with her groceries when I noticed I needed to restock the till. The safe was in the back room, so I quickly went to grab some more bills. As I was walking back with the money, I heard the bell above the door chime. I saw a man in an expensive-looking suit walking towards the counter with just a single can of Coke. Not wanting to keep anyone waiting, I literally ran to the front. I mean, who runs for a single can of Coke, right? But that's just how I was raised, always trying to provide good customer service. The man in the suit looked like he'd just stepped out of a business meeting in the city, completely out of place in our little country store. The moment I reached the register, he let out the most dramatic scoff I'd ever heard. He rolled his eyes and complained about how nice it must be to take my sweet time while customers were waiting. I was taken aback. I had literally sprinted to help him, and he hadn't even waited a full minute. I tried to apologize and explain that I was just getting change from the back, but he cut me off mid-sentence, rudely demanding that I just ring up his purchase. He slapped a $20 bill on the counter and turned away from me, making it clear he wasn't interested in any explanation. The total was just $1.75 for the Coke. When I was counting out his change, a massive pickup truck with a modified exhaust roared past the store. The noise drew his attention to the window, and he started muttering something about country hicks under his breath. That's when I saw my opportunity. Look, I'm not usually a petty person, but something about his attitude just got under my skin. While he was distracted, I gave that can of Coke 2 quick, subtle shakes. Nothing too violent, just enough to build up some pressure. I politely told him to have a great day as I handed him his change and Coke. He snatched both without a word and stormed out. Through the store's large front window, I watched him get into his shiny, black luxury car. He positioned himself in the driver's seat, adjusting his tie in the rearview mirror with this smug look on his face. Then came the moment of truth. He cracked open the can, and I swear, time slowed down. The pressurized soda erupted like a mini fountain, spraying all over his crisp white shirt, his silk tie, and yes, all over the leather interior of his fancy car. In his panic to control the situation, he knocked the can over, spilling what was left all over his expensive-looking pants. I could see him screaming inside his car, probably using words I wouldn't want to repeat. He looked back at the store, his face red with rage, but what could he do? Complain that his shaken soda exploded? He'd have to admit he was staring out the window and not paying attention when I handed it to him. The cherry on top came when he tried to start his car. In his fury, he kept turning the key too hard and stalled it 3 times before finally peeling out of our gravel parking lot, leaving a cloud of dust behind him. Through the store's security camera feed, at the register, I could see drops of Coke still dripping from his car door. Later that day, I told the store owners what happened, expecting maybe a reprimand. Instead, the old man who owned the place started laughing so hard, he had to sit down. Turned out they knew exactly who this guy was. Apparently, he'd been equally rude to them several times before, always acting like our little store was beneath him, despite stopping by whenever he needed something quick during his drives through our area. The next time he came in, about 2 weeks later, he was wearing a different suit and had a much more polite demeanor. He even managed to squeak out a thank you when I handed him his change. Funny how a little carbonated karma can adjust someone's attitude. I still work at that country store, and while I've never shaken another customer's drink since then, I'll never forget the day when a simple can of Coke taught someone a lesson in humility. I've been teaching middle school mathematics for over 15 years now. The last 5 of those years have been from a wheelchair after a car accident left me paralyzed from the waist down. Most of my students are wonderful, but there's always that one kid who makes things difficult. This year, that kid was in my 7th grade class. He was a notorious bully who'd terrorize other students, especially the smaller ones. He'd corner them in the hallways and demand their lunch money. I'd heard complaints from other teachers, but no one had concrete proof to take action. That changed last Wednesday when I caught him in the act. I was heading to the teacher's lounge during lunch break when I heard crying coming from behind the lockers. I wheeled around the corner and found him holding a smaller student against the wall, demanding money. I immediately commanded him to let the student go. The bully released the smaller student, who quickly ran away. He tried to defend himself by claiming they were just talking, but I shut that down quickly. I told him I had seen exactly what he was doing and that he was coming with me to the principal's office right away. He tried to argue, but I wouldn't hear it. I escorted him to the principal's office where he received a week's detention and his parents were called. His mother, who I'll call Karen, showed up shortly after. Karen immediately went on the defensive, demanding to know how I dared accuse her angel of bullying and insisting he would never do such a thing. When I calmly explained that I had witnessed him threatening another student for money with my own eyes, she lashed out. She accused me of picking on her son just because he was more active than other students, and then made a cruel comment about me being stuck in my wheelchair and taking it out on her son. I maintained my composure, but her words stung. The principal backed me up, and the detention stood despite Karen's protests. As they left the office, I heard her muttering about how I'd regret this. I didn't think much of it at the time. I should have. The following Monday, I was heading to my classroom on the 2nd floor. Our school has an elevator, but it was under maintenance that day, so I had to use the wheelchair ramp near the stairs. When I approached the top of the ramp, I felt a sudden, violent push from behind. The next few moments were terrifying. My wheelchair tipped forward, and I went tumbling down the stairs. The pain was excruciating. I heard screams and shouting around me as I lost consciousness. I woke up in the hospital with multiple fractures, a concussion, and severe bruising. The doctors told me I was lucky to be alive, but what happened next restored my faith in humanity. Several students had witnessed everything. They saw the bully deliberately push my wheelchair down the stairs, and they immediately reported it to school security. What's more, they had heard him bragging about it to his friends right after, saying his mom told him to teach me a lesson. When discussing the case, the school security officer told the detective that they had at least 8 witnesses who all provided consistent statements about what they saw. The detective inquired about the number of students who heard the bully's confession, to which the security officer confirmed that 5 different students had come forward with statements about his confession, specifically mentioning his mother's involvement. The police arrested the bully that same day. During questioning, he broke down and admitted everything. His mother had told him to show that crippled teacher what happens when she messes with our family. She had instructed him to wait until I was near the stairs and make it look like an accident. Karen was arrested the next day at her workplace. She kept screaming about how she was being framed and how her precious boy would never lie. I spent 6 weeks recovering in the hospital and at home. The school district was incredibly supportive, covering all my medical expenses and providing additional security measures, including cameras in all stairwells and ramps. When I returned to school, my heart nearly burst. The students had decorated my classroom with welcome back signs, and every single teacher came to greet me. The district's lawyer approached me with some news. The lawyer told me that the prosecutors had an airtight case, explaining that both the boy and his mother were facing serious charges. He told me the boy would be sent to juvenile detention, while his mother was looking at 5 to 7 years for conspiracy and endangering a minor. When I asked about the civil case, he assured me we had them dead to rights. He explained that the school district was backing my lawsuit completely, and given the deliberate nature of the attack and the premeditation involved, we were looking at a substantial settlement. The trial is next month, and my lawyer says they don't stand a chance. Karen's still in jail, unable to make bail, and her son is in juvenile detention. The other parents started a support fund for me, which I'm using to upgrade my classroom to be more accessible for any future disabled students or teachers. My students are doing better than ever. The bullying incidents have dropped to zero, and there's a new student-led anti-bullying program starting next semester. I, a 28-year-old female, and my boyfriend, Derek, 26-year-old male, are living in a beautiful 110-year-old home that has been divided landlord special style into two separate suites. We love our cozy home with all of its charm, namely squeaky old oak floors, whistling chimney, groaning pipes, and rattling radiators. We understood when we moved in that heritage-aged homes come with thin walls, but we figured it wouldn't be too big a problem as we're both quiet nerds. Context of who we are matters here. Our hobbies are puzzles, video games, cozy movie nights in, books, and Dungeons and Dragons. Derek and I are, simply put, kinda boring, but we're best friends and we love our cozy life. If we host anything, it's my weekly weekend Dungeons and Dragons game or Tuesday night bi-weekly book club. We are not loud or wild, just two nerds and our little cat. Unit 2 is leased by a person who sublets the bedroom directly below my kitchen. The first subtenant we nicknamed Karaoke Guy, due to his daily performances that would last, often until midnight. We found the noise more fun than annoying, and we liked humming along to his 5 times daily Mr. Brightside performances. When Karaoke Guy moved away, we missed him immediately. Karaoke Guy was replaced by someone we called Bridge Troll. Bridge Troll was an older man, maybe mid-50s, who brought with him a little car that wasn't assigned a space, as we only have 2 spaces, 1 per unit. He parked in our spot, which we need and use. I texted the landlord about it, and the car was moved. Just 1 day in, he continually parked in our spot, despite being told by the landlord to use the street. Derek drives a large work van full of company tools, so street parking presented a robbery risk for us. Bridge Troll complained so much that my landlord asked if we would mind parking on the grass on the side of the house from now on, as Bridge Troll claimed the work van was often parked directly in front of his door, which wasn't true. We complied for the sake of peace. During this time, we've been hearing banging from the room downstairs, but we thought nothing of it, chalked it up to moving in sounds or maybe workout equipment being used. We were quite mistaken. The banging became a daily occurrence for the next 8 months, sometimes with a few days between. That felt like heaven. Every day, anytime after 7:30 in the evening, there would be banging, yelling, and threats. One night around 11:45 p.m., just as Derek and I were about to head to bed, I went to the kitchen for water. Before I could head back, we heard a series of very loud bangs on our front door. We could see the old wooden door rattling from the force. I immediately yelled for Derek to help, as I was scared. Derek came out, checked the peephole, and opened the door to Bridge Troll, who immediately started screaming at us to be quiet and that he was going to call the police for all of the noise. Derek is quite tall, 6'3" lumberjack type. I am very small. Derek is a gentle giant. I grabbed a kitchen utensil and yelled from the kitchen that he should calm down, or I'd call emergency services. Bridge Troll continued yelling at us to be quiet several more times, and Derek just said, "Okay," then slowly closed the door on him. He left after a few more minutes of yelling at the door, and Derek put my riled self to bed. I texted the landlord about this, but got no reply. We soon noticed the banging wasn't random. We had assumed the best, but after this incident, the banging clearly only occurred under my kitchen, his bedroom, whenever we stepped foot in there, or the adjacent library or dining room after 7:30 p.m. Bridge Troll developed a habit of pounding on his ceiling while screaming that he was calling emergency services, and that we needed to be quiet, stop it, be quiet, go away. I again texted my landlord and began keeping a record of exactly what date and time this was happening. No reply from the landlord for the first month of this. 2 months in, we moved a huge rug into the dining area to reduce noise, started using headphones for music as we cooked, and set up a TV in our bedroom for movie nights as it's on the opposite side of the house. But this wasn't good enough for Bridge Troll. The situation worsened when I was injured in a fire. I was on bed rest, barely able to walk, with third-degree burns to about 35% of my left leg and second-degree burns spanning up much of my left side and hands. This is when Bridge Troll started calling the police. One day, while Derek was at work, I felt well enough to hobble to the kitchen, get a snack, and set up in the living room for a movie. Within minutes, the banging and yelling started. I was at my wit's end on strong medication, in severe pain, having just had my second round of flesh removal that morning, when I heard this is the police department alongside some banging on the door. I painfully made my way to the door, which is extremely difficult when you're healing burns. Movement felt like sandpaper against my whole left side, and explained the situation to the officer. Fortunately, he said he suspected my neighbor might be unreasonable, as once he arrived he went to Bridge Troll's door first, and Bridge Troll refused to answer. I was wished a speedy recovery and went back to my movie. Bridge Troll banged on the floor several more times that day when I was literally unable to even walk around. At this point, I called my landlord. I got voicemail but finally received a text. The landlord explained she had been in China for a few months, so she didn't get my texts, but would tell the tenant to get his subtenant under control. No changes occurred. 5 months into this situation, Derek was out of town, about a 3-hour drive away, sleeping over at a friend's house. My burns were healing extremely well, and I was able to take care of myself again. I was celebrating this with a cozy reading night and was making popcorn around 9 p.m. on a weekend. I heard the banging but ignored it, until I saw a dark figure in my yard. Our yard isn't shared, and from a window in my library room, I could see all of it without being in view myself with the lights off. I carefully positioned myself behind the curtain and looked out, and there was Bridge Troll. I prepared myself for another door incident, but without Derek to keep things calm. I normally feel I can protect myself, but at this time I was still heavily bandaged and healing. Bridge Troll, however, didn't knock. He walked around trying to peer into my living room windows. I watched while calling emergency services and whispered to the dispatcher about my situation, but Bridge Troll returned to his unit. The police arrived and took my statement but said technically he hadn't done anything illegal, so they would try to talk to him and make a report. But that's all they could do. Bridge Troll didn't answer his door, and Derek did a frantic late-night drive home to protect his injured girlfriend. 6 months in, the landlord finally got involved. She inspected both suites, doing his first, then came to us. She said she was very happy with the state of our home and that we had clearly tried to minimize noise. She explained her hands were tied, as it's difficult to evict a subtenant without evicting the tenant, and she really liked the actual tenant as he'd been there without issues for years. She offered Bridge Troll a different unit she rents in town at a discounted rate, but he refused it and demanded we be kicked out. She told us that he texts her often to complain about the noise and the partying and fighting in our suite, which made us all laugh. Even the landlord didn't think Derek and I looked like party people. The situation continued until finally, in October, Bridge Troll's car disappeared for several days. The next day, a moving truck arrived and several young men moved items into my neighbor's house. As quickly as it had begun, it was over. Bridge Troll was gone. It felt as though the heavy, overcast clouds parted, and a clear blue sky shone through, streaked with brilliant yellows and golds that indicated the dawn of a new day. We had been saved. With Bridge Troll gone, our home seemed warmer with the sheer force of the love and relief we felt. This is our home now. Currently, we're dealing with new subtenants, as seemingly 7 people moved into that room. But that's an ongoing situation. For now, I can safely get myself a cup of tea whenever I like. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.